All eyes are on Parliament Hill tomorrow, where the government will deliver its throne speech. Canadians will be watching closely to see how the feds plan to tackle a resurgence in cases and at the same time help the economy recover from COVID-19. But 5 former premiers say that economic prosperity is also being hampered by something else right now, a trade deal with Europe that does more for the EU than for Canada. Jean Charest is one of those premiers. He was Premier of Quebec from 2003 to 2012. He's now a partner at McCarthy Tétrault, and he joins us from Montreal. Hi, Mr. Charest. Pleasure to welcome you back to the program.
Thank you, Vashi.
This letter that you and your colleagues wrote asserts that CETA has now been enforced for 3 years and it has failed to deliver on its promises for Canada's agri-food exporters. When you write failed to deliver, what specifically do you mean?
The expectations were there would be a marked increase in agri-food exports to the European Union. That has not been the case, Vashi. We've seen progress in a lot of areas, for example, lobsters, because tariffs went off lobsters and made us more competitive with the United States, cranberries, maple syrup, but in other areas like canola, pork, beef, and actions by the European, some national countries that are contrary to the agreement has meant that the amount of business that we do with Europe is not at the level that we expected it to be at this time. And there are obstacles, non-tariff barriers to trade that the Europeans need to address and deal with.
Is this a matter of enforcement? Like, is there a strategy that the federal government should be employing to, for example, force those rules to be respected in Europe, or is that even possible?
It is possible, and it starts with pressure on behalf of our ambassadors, our trade commissioners, and the Prime Minister himself. We believe that the Prime Minister himself needs to raise this issue with leaders of national governments in Europe. The G7 is an opportunity for him to do that and to ask them to respect their part of the bargain and to deal with the non-tariff barriers. One example we quote in the letter is Italy. We've been sending durum wheat to Italy for 100 years now that goes into the making of pasta that goes all over the world, Vashi. And now the Italians have decided to do a labeling policy for pasta that says pasta made in Italy and discriminates against Canadian products and durum wheat and canola. And so for that reason, we believe the Canadian government and the Prime Minister should be arguing that this is a good deal for everyone. This trade agreement, by the way, recognizes geographical indications for the first time ever. And what this is about is recognizing that a specific Parma ham is made in Parma and protecting the branding of that product. The Europeans made a big gain on that front, and Canada held up its part of the bargain. Now, Europeans also have to do what's necessary to hold up their part of the bargain.
My understanding is that about a dozen countries haven't even ratified the deal yet. Yep. Does that stand in the way to, I guess, the potential effectiveness of that kind of pressure that you say should be applied?
Well, the very short answer would be no, for this reason. The way it works in the European Union, once the Commission that represents all 27 countries says that we go ahead with a deal, it's in effect. And since it's been exactly 3 years now that the deal has been applied to all 28 at the time, 27 now that Great Britain is out, in the European Union. And the first thing that happened, Vashi, that was good for everyone, is that all the tariffs between both countries, and that was the easy part, disappeared on the very first day. In that respect, this trade agreement is the most advanced trade agreement in the world. But the real nux of the matter in trade today, Vashi, isn't the tariffs. That's the easy part. The real obstacles are in what we call non-tariff barriers, regulations, norms, subsidies that shouldn't happen. That's where the real action is. And on agri-food, in other areas it's gone well, but on agri-food, the European side has not lived up to its part of the bargain.
Is pressure the only strategy, or should they be considering counter non-tariff trade barriers? Is that kind of something that should be in their wheelhouse, or is that taking it too far?
Well, it's always in the wheelhouse. We do it with the Americans, we do it with other countries, right. But it's also, every economist will tell you that is, to a certain extent, self-defeating, because you penalize your trade partner, you penalize yourself also. So the first step is really pressure. And I think the Canadian government, Mr. Trudeau, needs to play to the fact that we are working with like-minded countries who all want to counter protectionism, all want to see our economies pick up after this pandemic, and that we want to be a counterpoint to the United States, to put it quite bluntly. Canada should position itself as the other version of what trade should be about, as opposed to what Mr. Trump is proposing. And there's a good opportunity for us to do that in the world. In fact, we are doing it to a certain extent. There's a group called the Ottawa Group that was put together by Jim Carr, the Minister of Trade, to look at multilateralism. And Minister Ang now is pursuing that. So Canada is a country to whom others look to find an alternative route to protectionism. And on this front, we should be saying to the Europeans, listen, you've signed up to the program, deliver on your part of it, part of the deal, so that we can all continue to grow our economies.
Before I let you go, Mr. Charest, I did want to ask you about what kind of mini eyes of the people in Canada are on right now. That's the throne speech that's coming up tomorrow here in Ottawa. In the lead up to this speech, the provinces have become very specific in their ask for a greater amount of money transferred to them, especially where healthcare is concerned. Do you think that ask, from your perspective, is realistic?
This is a historical ask. Why? When healthcare was implemented, universal healthcare, Vashi, in Canada, it's the federal government that enticed the provinces to come into the deal. And it was, of course, we know, Tommy Douglas in Saskatchewan who initiated that. But then the Fed said to the other provinces, we should do this in Canada. At the time, Vashi, the deal was that the federal government would assume 50% of the cost. Well, they're not doing that now. And so the provinces are saying to the federal government, listen, you need to pay what was initially your commitment to the cost of health care. The Romano Commission in early 2000s said that the Fed should pay at least 25%. And I think they're not far from that, but they should be paying more, especially in regards to what's happened to us around COVID-19.
Do you think, though, I guess, there has been some discussion around, for example, pockets of money from the federal government, rather than simply increasing the CHT, the Canada Health Transfer, to give provinces X amount of money for long-term care, let's say, but attach some national standards to it? I ask you specifically about that because, of course, you're in Quebec. You've led that province, a province where strings attached doesn't usually go over very well. How do you think that would go over there?
Well, it would not fly in Quebec. And in 2004, when we did the last big deal with increases of 6% a year to match the increase in demand in healthcare, that the feds increased the funding 6% a year, it was without any conditions. And we called it asymmetrical federalism, which is part of our reality. And, it's the provinces, Vashi, that are responsible for healthcare. They are the ones on the front line who run the system. And I understand why the federal government would say, well, we'd like to see more money going to this or going to that. But let's be very clear. The federal government has no ability, competency to run the healthcare systems. And they should avoid the temptation, because of public opinion or polling or focus groups, to try to do it in an indirect way. So there's no political easy answer to this. It's the provinces who run the system, and they should have the resources and financial resources to meet the demands.
You're describing, of course, what is a unique and unprecedented situation in this country. How significant do you think this throne speech will be, and what do you think, from your perspective, it has to accomplish?
The throne speech, frankly, at this point is taken over by the emergence and resurgence of a second wave. I think the initial thinking was this is an opportunity for us to rethink how we operate our economy and where we're going. But frankly, Vashi, the reality is the second wave of this pandemic has now started. It's been acknowledged in Quebec. And I think in the very short term, every resources we have are going to be focused on containing that, surviving it, making sure we keep people's heads over water. And then I'm expecting a look into the future that says, we need to deal with, for example, with those who are mostly affected by this pandemic, what we've learned, women, minorities, visible minorities, youth, and be more effective in supporting them as we look ahead. And yes, as we stimulate the economy, which we should be going out there and supporting sectors like the aerospace industry, with whom I'm involved, deeply involved, with a green recovery, that's fine, infrastructure. and looking at what we can do intelligently as we reinvest in our economy to get it up and going. That will, I think, be the perspective. But let's be very realistic here. In the end, if there's the second surge is what we think it's going to be, it'll be all hands on deck to be able to manage that in the short term to get us to the other part of rebuilding our economy.
Okay, Mr. Charest, I'll leave it there. Thank you so much for your time, as always.
Thank you very much, Vashi. Bye-bye.
Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.